Imagine waking up one morning, grabbing your life savings, and rushing to the bakery, only to find out your money isn't enough to buy a single loaf of bread. Not because you're poor. Because your government broke your money overnight. This actually happened. And the story of how it did, will change the way you think about money forever. To understand the disaster, you need to see Zimbabwe before it happened. In the 1980s and early 1990s, Zimbabwe was called the breadbasket of Africa. Rich farmland, a thriving middle class, and a currency so strong that one Zimbabwean dollar was worth more than $1. People had jobs. Shops had goods. The future looked bright. Then came the decision that started everything. In the late 1990s, President Robert Mugabe launched a land reform program, seizing farms from white landowners and redistributing them. On paper, it sounded like justice. In reality, it was economic suicide. The new farmers had no experience. Food production collapsed. And the government had a dangerous idea to fix it. When the government ran out of money, they did what desperate governments always do, they printed more. And more. And more. At first it seemed to work. People had cash. But then something terrifying happened. Prices started doubling. Then doubling again. Then doubling every single day. The more money they printed, the more worthless it became. Here's how to understand hyperinflation. Imagine you have $1, and there's only one apple in the world. That apple costs $1. Now imagine the government creates $9 more. Suddenly there are $10 chasing one apple. The apple now costs $10. Your original dollar just lost 90% of its value, overnight. Zimbabwe did this with an entire economy. For years. By 2007, inflation hit 1,000%. People started carrying cash in shopping bags just to buy groceries. By 2008, it hit 100,000%. Then 1,000,000%. And it kept going. At its peak, Zimbabwe's inflation rate was 89.7 sextillion%. Prices were doubling every 24 hours. The government was printing $100 trillion bills, and they still weren't enough. For ordinary Zimbabweans, life became a nightmare. Workers demanded to be paid twice a day, because their morning salary was worth nothing by afternoon. Doctors, teachers, and engineers abandoned the country by the millions. Supermarket shelves went empty. Children stopped going to school. People burned stacks of cash for warmth because firewood cost more. Money had become more valuable as fuel than as currency. The world watched in disbelief. International economists warned Zimbabwe's government to stop printing money. The IMF stepped in. Other nations offered help. But the government kept printing. Why? Because stopping the press meant admitting failure. It meant the government could no longer pay its own soldiers. And in a country with guns, that was a risk they refused to take. The breaking point came in 2009. The government made a radical decision, they simply abandoned their own currency. Overnight, the Zimbabwean dollar ceased to exist. Citizens were told to use US dollars, South African rand, or any foreign currency they could find. For most people, that meant they had nothing. A nation's entire savings had evaporated into worthless paper. After the collapse, Zimbabwe slowly rebuilt. Using foreign currencies, inflation stopped. Shops refilled. Life crept back toward normal. But the damage was permanent. An entire generation lost their savings. Skilled professionals who fled never returned. The country went from Africa's breadbasket to one of its poorest nations in less than a decade. Trust in institutions, once broken, takes generations to rebuild. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Zimbabwe is not unique. Germany did this in 1923. Venezuela did this in 2018. Hungary, Yugoslavia, Argentina, the pattern is always the same. A government in crisis. A printing press. And millions of ordinary people who trusted their currency, paying the price. The question is never whether it can happen again. The question is, where will it happen next? The story of Zimbabwe teaches us something profound. Money is not real in the way a house or a field of wheat is real. Money is trust, a shared agreement between people that this piece of paper has value. The moment that trust breaks, money becomes paper. The moment governments forget this, and print without restraint, it is always ordinary people who suffer. Not the ones who caused it. This is Wandering World, where history's greatest economic disasters come alive. If this story changed how you think about money, hit subscribe. Because next time, we're going inside the Dutch tulip mania, the world's first speculative bubble, where people traded their houses for flowers. You won't believe it actually happened.